Do Pizza Bots Dream of Electric Guitars is an episode about people's relationship with childhood media, the memories attached to fictional characters, and the baggage created when things change over time. Do Pizza Bots Dream of Electric Guitars is also an episode that features teen Homer enjoying hip-hop in the mid-90s. This is another one of those episodes secretly about die-hard Simpsons fans, isn't it? Why are rapping 90s animals the writer's muse for these kinds of stories, I wonder? I love how this episode opens, how it immediately drops us into this flashback in the 1990s. No credits, no couch gag, no opening set piece. It's not like that 90s show, where they set up the floating timeline and the math involved. Here, they're like, boom, 90s. They're throwing the audience into the pool. It really is a shock to the system at first, seeing Homer so into 90s hip-hop, throwing out all this cheesy, outdated slang at his dad, seeing Lenny and Carl breakdancing on the curb, and then how he's gonna work at his happy place, this Chuck E. Cheese or Showbiz Pizza knockoff with animatronics. The whole setup is so completely foreign to longtime Simpsons fans. Look at Homer, how much he enjoys this job, listening to Gil pump his employees up, and enthusiastically getting the kids ready for the show. And when the animatronics break down, how quickly he thinks on his feet, coming up with an impromptu Ice Ice Baby pizza themed verse. It's super endearing. Homer has always loved music and can be obsessive about his interests, so it works well for his characterization. For the story to work, it has to demonstrate why Homer likes these things so much, and find a reason why it would be a painful memory. The reveal that Gil was trafficking illicit substances is pretty surprising, to be honest. You don't really expect things to get this real with old Gil. At the same time, Gil is a shifty character in general, and this FBI raid works as a funny way to ruin Homer's hard work. The opening flashback is also pretty slick in how it sets up two core narrative elements. First, the Homer-Grandpa conflict, how they fight at the beginning, and then Grandpa refuses to go to his show. Second, the theme of media reboots, how initially these animatronics are singing a Rock Around the Clock parody from the 50s, before Homer makes a then-contemporary tag team parody. Both of these elements are going to be key in making the final act of the story work. In addition, the flashback also saves time by not wasting precious minutes on a useless opening set piece. Typically, they'd open with Homer taking the kids to Ralph's party, melting down, and then flashing back. Instead, we skip all that. We get that personal look at Homer's backstory, and then whisk us back to the present day. Of course, the downside of this approach is that they're throwing a lot of brand new info at the audience. What's with all this new hidden trauma? How many dead skeletons are living in Homer's subconscious? It's season 32. Why haven't we heard of any of this before? This is definitely the biggest challenge to this episode, in making the emotional stakes work. There's a danger of this whole adventure feeling arbitrary. Why should we care about all these animatronics that we just learned about? Isn't it bad storytelling by picking this random new thing instead of something already part of Homer's characterization? Like, maybe he could have worked for a bakery making donuts. However, I do like the choice to go with something completely unfamiliar, from the point of view of the audience. It does feel more realistic. We're talking about a childhood relic, a piece of media buried in a person's past that isn't actively pursued in the present day. Everyone has these buried in their brains somewhere. Like, for people who've watched my channel for years, would you know what my childhood relic is? Of course you wouldn't. I only remember after getting mollywopped by it a month ago. As random as these animatronics may seem, they do give the story a clear direction to go in Act 2. Homer's lost his youthful spirit, so we gotta find these guys again. These mini fantasies of Homer's childlike wonder are super cute. Love how he would shuffle his pancakes. I also appreciate the choice to not have Homer be totally depressed and miserable after his breakdown, that Homer is just less whimsical in general, and that Marge and Moe both miss this aspect of his personality. There are definitely stakes to the story, but they do a nice job keeping things relaxed and fun. For now. Plus, this side quest gives them the opportunity to expand the scope of the story. Now we can bounce around Springfield in Act 2. Watching this reminded me of how much I enjoy this Simpsons story structure. These excuses to do a bunch of random character sketches. And each of these brings something entertaining to the table. I like how when they first visit Gil, how he hasn't learned anything and is totally ready to start another pizza parlor trafficking front. We get some Frank robot shenanigans, always a safe bet for laughs. I would say the disco stew scene is the weakest overall. The joke about his dad being doo-wop Steve is funny in a corny way, but then they go for a public domain Debbie complete with a song, and I've had enough. I guess it's funny in a vaudeville Muppets kind of way. Then of course, there's the Sideshow Mel appearance, which is honestly one of my favorite HD Simpsons jokes. I'm biased a little because I love Columbo, and Moe's Peter Falk game is on point. But also, there's some great character acting here on Mel. How confident he is, the way he lies like Columbo villains. Then, after revealing the sex robot, his slow clap in defeat. I remember when doing his Simpsons histories, expressing shock that he's sexualizing an animatronic to this degree, and all the FNAF fans in the comments were like, "Oh, you sweet summer child." Actually, now that I think about it, I wonder how much FNAF brought about this specific nostalgic plot device. The Simpsons were definitely pulling from the zeitgeist for this one. The jokes as a whole are solid, definitely above average for the past few seasons. They have a lot of fun with the 90s setting and the animatronics. I love the way Homer dresses them up and then dances with them. Then his accusation to the FBI, "You're only harassing them because they're rappers." The Hollywood stuff in the back half has some good material too, like Bart and Lisa sweet-talking their way into the studio by pretending to be vapid Hollywood up-and-comers. Yarly Smith does vocal fry so well. Some people might not like the directness of the Sonic movie reference, but I think it's cool seeing it immortalized. Also, with this joke about the overworked and exploited movie animators, did The Simpsons predict Across the Spider-Verse? They should have gotten Lord and Miller to be in this instead. Anyway, now we gotta talk about J.J. Abrams, the actual guest star of the episode. Cue the lens flare. He delivers the big shift in the story, where the simple quest for lost animatronics turns into an examination of reboots in Hollywood. Unfortunately, this episode does fall into some of The Simpsons' most annoying traps with its guest stars, with all the gushing and fawning. Like, these assistant characters only exist for this purpose. Even J.J. Abrams is self-describing himself as a master of character arcs. I want to point out right now that this episode was released a year and a half after The Rise of Skywalker. For what it's worth, they do poke some fun at him. I love how Homer glares here, when history repeats itself and JJ smugly declares, "That's what I do." Even still, this sarcastic, over-the-top gushing feels like The Simpsons trying to have their cake and eat it. You guys are just doing the Elon Musk and Lady Gaga thing again, just with a layer of irony. You're not fooling anyone. I'm not saying that he should be like Andy Garcia's character from The Book Job. I just wish more cynicism was explicitly written into his whole operation. The story necessitates that the Hollywood producer sees Homer's childlike wonder and is inspired to buy the property and reboot it. The end of the episode frames it as JJ having his own unique creative vision for these characters, and Homer should give him a chance. Guzzle down this reboot, you stubborn man-child. But there's no personal attachment conveyed between J.J. Abrams and these pizza robots. The text of the episode shows that he just bounces from thing to thing on a childish whim. The text also shows that these robots were always a means to make money. Gil literally says so. We should feel cynical about Abrams' motivations, and Homer should feel burned by him whisking them away. I don't think it's unreasonable for Homer to think this is going to be some soulless cash grab. This isn't about Homer trying to shut down someone's creative vision, as much as the episode positions it that way. I think if Abrams were presented as being just like Homer, also having a strong attachment to these guys, Homer lashing out at his reboot would be more meaningful. As is, it muddles its ultimate message. It's a little too pro-Hollywood. It's like the ending of Radioactive Man without the sarcasm. That being said, I think this episode does have something interesting to say about fandom and the way we sometimes react to reboots. I think they biffed the J.J. Abrams stuff, but they did lay a strong foundation characterization-wise to tackle this subject. After losing the animatronics the second time, it makes sense why Homer spirals further and aligns with Comic Book Guy. What was a subconscious childhood relic has blossomed into a conscious adult fandom, and Homer is going to have a stronger reaction now. I like their decision to do a fast forward here, quickly zipping through a whole year while Homer crusades online against J.J. Abrams. It works well mechanically, since we need to wait for a whole movie to be made. It also makes Homer's transformation more believable. Homer's turning himself into a comic book guy, and that kind of thing doesn't happen overnight. The downside is, we don't get to see much of his campaign, but we can let our personal experiences witnessing fandoms fill in some of these gaps. This episode commits strongly to the personal aspect of fandom. It's less about making a value statement about Hollywood reboots in general, and is more interested in the motivations and behavior of fans. At the climax, Grandpa shows up and tells Homer that a movie can't ruin his childhood, it was actually Grandpa who did it. Homer tearfully hugs him, saying, "Of course, it's not the movie that sucks, it was you sucking. It was always you sucking. I hate you, Dad." Obviously a very snarky and subversive heartwarming moment, but this conclusion is supported by the story. We, as the audience, were so hung up on the animatronics that these argumentative grandpa scenes get tossed aside. Homer literally told us that this was his happy place. Clearly, Homer's attachment is a form of escapism from his unhappy home life. There is a danger to this narrative approach in that it maybe sort of implies that this happens with every instance of hyper-fandom. Is this episode arguing that every angry fandom or negative reaction is fueled by some underlying dissatisfaction in their personal lives? The old argument of happy people don't act this way. I don't think this episode is arguing that on a large scale. I think this is more about a specific journey for Homer that could apply to others. Obviously, some people just don't like things due to personal taste. That stance is so self-evident, we don't need to check off those boxes. Instead, this episode takes more of a soul-searching introspective look at our relationship with media. That a person should understand themselves and then understand the media they consume. I do like the overarching message about at least giving people a chance to try something new. Homer got to reimagine these characters into something he cares about and made them relevant for a new generation. The same chance should be given for Bart and Lisa's generation. In the end, this isn't an episode that makes a value statement about reboots, it's fundamentally about why we want to gatekeep. I remember right before this episode aired, showrunner Matt Selman went on Twitter and stirred up the hornet's nest by highlighting the timeline shift of this flashback. Part of me feels like Matt was just looking for trouble here, as he got so many replies of fans puking and saying the show just needs to end. On the other hand, okay, that's a pretty interesting debate to bring up right now. They're smacking us in the face with the 90s, right from the opening, and then closing with a statement about media changing with the times. I see what you did there. Whether the floating timeline is a good or bad thing is an argument for another day, but it's a damn clever narrative device here. There's a meta-narrative about The Simpsons somewhere in here, similar to the Poochie episode, without it explicitly being about The Simpsons itself. Or maybe I look at this episode this way because, really, every episode is about the Simpsons fandom when you think about it. But hey, that's just a theory. As a whole, I enjoyed Do Pizza Bot's Dream of Electric Guitars. I liked it much more on a rewatch than during its first airing, to be honest. I think it touches on some of those meta-narratives about the show without getting too navel-gazy about the industry. I love a good industry spoof, and The Simpsons has done plenty of them. But I care more about The Simpsons characters, and this episode does give us a glimpse at an unknown part of Homer's past, giving us a new slice of context about his personality. The story is structured well, the themes are well integrated, and we get a bunch of funny character shtick in Act 2. What more could you ask for? The J.J. Abrams stuff brings it down a bit, where I wouldn't put it in the top tier of HD Simpsons. I don't like the implication that Hollywood should get a blank check to forever release passionless reboot garbage. Maybe with a couple tweaks to the framing of the message, it would come off better. But it covers a topic with enough substance and nuance that I think fans should give it a look. Please don't be scared off by 90s teen Homer. I promise he can't hurt you. I won't make any guarantees about the robot.